This is a story about a summer romance between the boy from town and the girl whose family has a big summer house on the lake. You know, they're from different circles, not meant to be. But the story doesn't start or end there. First, it comes at you from many years after the summer romance, when the lovers almost meet again. And then, the real story about what happened that summer, the secrets and uncertainties, the what-ifs and could-have-beens, get a second look, and maybe a second chance.
And actually, I wanted to show, I'm going to flip around and show you.
This is today's storyteller, author Christina Holbrook.
It's some of my own family history.
She's in her writing room at her desk in the mountains of Colorado.
So this portrait here,
she's sharing her art and her storytelling inspirations with us.
That was actually grandmother Morgan.
Wow.
And that was my father's grandmother.
She's talking about how her family history found its way into her fiction.
She was being presented to New York society.
Isn't that fascinating? So she's fairly young. She's stern looking, but she's fairly young really in that portrait.
Yeah. I suppose she's 18, although she looks a little older than that.
She looks serious. She looks very serious. Christina's serious and romantic novel, All the Flowers of the Mountain, fits into that coming-of-age love story category. But it's much more than that. There are scenes of exuberant, youthful beauty and joy, juxtaposed with a dark secret, a mystery that slowly unravels for the reader. You'll hear a snippet from the audiobook in a few minutes, when Christina and I kind of dance around some plot points to avoid spoilers. But what we don't shy away from here, one of the things that impresses me most about talking to Christina, is we don't avoid her condition. She openly talks about the certainty and uncertainty of her diagnosis.
And I think, too, having a really serious illness.
I'm humbled, really, to share her essential thoughts about how the diagnosis has changed her and how she now moves through her life.
You just can't help. You start to see the world differently.
That's coming up on this Desideratum. Stay with us.
I have a little desk, and on one side I have this little picture. I don't know if I can. That picture is by that Finnish artist who is in this story, Akseli Gallen-Kallela.
Oh.
And it is an old magician is narrating a story, the story of the Kalevala, which is the Finnish kind of epic, to the writer. And so it's a picture, it's sort of an imagined picture of this magical figure dictating this story to the writer, and the writer's writing down the whole story.
Oh.
So it's, I have these sort of family pictures around me.
And art. Those are both really great examples of art.
Yeah.
And I think that's so fascinating that you surround yourself with things like that, because art and how we experience art and how we express art is really integral to this story. It's a real theme.
I think that's true. I hadn't thought of it. It's funny. The nature, people do ask me a lot about, the story has a lot of descriptive passages of nature, and that seems to be a big theme. But I do think art is important too. For the main character, Kit, art is symbolic or goes along with self-expression, with authenticity.
Yes.
With exploration of the world and what's out there, ideas, who she would like to become. And in contrast to how she's been raised in the Morgan family, which to her feels very restrictive, very superficial, status conscious. and everything that is sort of rigid and confining.
Yeah.
And sort of in opposition to what art feels like for her.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a passage that I wrote down. Art is a way of looking at the world, which is what you just said, actually.
Yeah.
This was Kit's thought, not just an escape valve for expressing a flood of anger or frustration. Art required effort and an ability to focus attention to learn what it meant to really see. You celebrate art in the book in a couple different ways, and I really appreciated that.
That's nice. Yeah, I guess, it does feel like art, whatever medium you're interested in, art is often a way of connecting. Certainly for a writer, you're often hoping that what you're creating will connect with someone. And so you kind of feel that connection with other people too.
Yes.
That is somewhat in contrast with the Morgan family, where it's less about connection and more about who's on top and who's on the bottom, sort of measuring yourself against others as opposed to connecting with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other theme to me is that I found the setting and the descriptions about how you physically are swimming in the lake, or experiencing the clay, or just even the sunshine on you, that how we exist in nature is also a big theme. There's almost a spirituality to it. She talks about everything having its own energy, and again, she sort of imbues that into her art. And as a young person, I think she expresses that she feels less alone in nature than she does with her own family.
I remember feeling that way as a kid, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other ways that I felt like you tied into nature were through these really, really beautiful traditional songs. The title is anchored in one of them. Can you talk a little bit about the songs that show up in this story?
Yeah, the particular song that you're mentioning, which I think the modern version of that is called Wild Mountain Thyme. And All the Flowers of the Mountain is a line from that song, but that was originally, I want to say it's an 18th century poem called The Braes of Balquhidder. So it started out as a poem. Music was added to it. It evolved over time, but that is one of, I think, about 5 different pieces of music that are in the book that are all either poems or were originally poems or were old chants sung in bars.
He strode up to the front of the room, picked up the guitar, and slung the strap over his shoulder. Hamming it up, he called out in his best corny Irish brogue, "Calm yourselves, lads, and I'll give you a tune." He ran through a riff, tuning up the instrument. Then he slammed out a chord. "This is for us." The bar erupted in cheers. Adrenaline pounded through him now, and he launched into a raucous drinking song.
And it's just something that I have always loved. I kind of always imagined Michael as being someone who would be a folk singer. And I guess because of the nature of the story, many of the songs do have this kind of romantic aspect to them.
Michael noticed a lot of unfamiliar faces mixed in with the regular crowd. "Looks like the summer people have discovered you, Ollie," he commented. "Yeah, and I'll not be complaining. Speaking of summer people, there was a group from New York City stopped in last night. I think the name was Morgan." Morgan? Michael froze. He hadn't heard the name Morgan in almost 2 years. Now it caught him off guard. He put his beer down. "Are you talking about Catherine Morgan?" "Slow down, Mike," a voice inside his head warned him. The beers had given him a disorienting buzz. "That's right. Catherine. Kitty, I think," said Ollie. He looked at Michael with curiosity. "Do you know her?" Teresa caught something strange in the tone of his voice. Mikey? Who's he talking about? Just some rich summer people. Tom joined in. I've heard of that family. One of the daughters, that one, Kitty, she's a nutcase. They had to lock her up in a mental institution or something.
I think some of the danger that Kit especially feels is being in a world that's sort of manipulating her and her view of herself. I mean, even the sort of inciting incident in this story.
Okay, a quick interruption and confession. Christina and I end up talking in a kind of code here in my effort to prevent any spoilers. We're dancing around talking about self-harm in the story.
I mean, even the sort of inciting incident in this story is perceived and reported to Kit by her parents. And that leaves her with a lot of uncertainty and also a certain amount of self-hatred, really, about like, what has happened? What have I done? How could I have done this?
Yeah.
Because it's all being seen through the lens of others who have their ulterior motives.
Yes.
So I think maybe that is part of the growth for the two main characters in this story to understand more fully who they are. And I think each of them, I hope, the reader feels that each of them supports the other in coming to understand who they are and what they're really capable of in the world.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that is ultimately so romantic, isn't it? That the person that you love holds up a kind of mirror to you and says, don't you see? Don't you see what I can see?
Yeah.
That really this is on so many levels, is a story of personal growth and self-discovery. And in that process, there are some things that happen that are really difficult to think about and talk about. Character that you've written who is, bragging at a bar about getting what he wants from girls through alcohol, through drugs, through any means possible, basically. Right. And he doesn't really care about the consent. And that's pretty dark.
I have in a number of book club readings where I've been invited to talk about the book. And in more than one, someone will always ask me, did you know someone like Brandon? And usually what comes next is another woman will say, every woman knows someone like Brandon. Things that women have to navigate, a lot of out there that are not necessarily looking out for the best for women. And, that can be individuals who are looking to take advantage. It can be companies and people trying to sell things that are looking to take advantage. I mean, it's hard to own person in the midst of all of this.
Yeah. Yes, and that's really Kit's journey through this book is trying to figure out how to be your own person.
Yeah.
Well, I won't spoil anything. I won't say anything more about that. I want people to be able to discover that and have that revealed to them as you've written it, because it's extremely compelling storytelling. But I want to talk a little bit about when I met you last year. You won in the romance category, the Colorado Book Awards.
Yeah, so that was, and I guess I'll talk a little bit about my health situation.
Yeah, I'd love for you to.
I had worked on this project for 5 years. I just completed a big rewrite of the project. And at that moment, at the end of March 2022, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor and was and continues to be a really, I had surgery, which was successful, but it continues to be a situation that has to be monitored. It's very serious. But in that particular moment, no one really knew what my timeline was. And I was, at first just sort of despairing that I'd worked on this project, which was so important to me. for so many years. And now, it was over. And so a local publisher called Sunroom Studios came to my rescue. And she said, I will figure out a way to get this book published in 3 months. The book came out in July of 2022. And that was just miraculous. And it was so wonderful to hold this book and to be able to do some book signings and interact with people and have people read it. And then because of that, I was able to enter All the Flowers of the Mountain into the Colorado Book Award. And first of all, I was thrilled to be a finalist. But then I recall, this was last June, 2023, walking into the Penrose Mansion, I think is where the award is held. And I realized this was a bigger deal than I had somehow imagined it to be. Everybody was dressed in long gowns and their hors d'oeuvres were being passed around. And there was a program listing the bios of all the finalists. And I was both sort of like mortified because there were very many really good writers, but I also had this sense of like, well, I guess I don't have to worry because like there's no way I'm going to win anything in this company. So I can just sit back and have a drink and like, oh, who cares?
Relax. Yeah, just relax.
Yeah, relax. And so then it was announced that I was the winner, or All the Flowers of the Mountain was a winner in the romance category. And it was a huge honor. And it was, just to compliment the group of people that put that award on, you sort of feel like you're in the Academy Awards of book publishing. It was very well put together, very professional. And there were people from the governor's office and from the press, and it really felt like quite a big deal. So
yeah, a real celebration for you.
Yeah, it really was. And a really awesome group of writers too. And I think too, having a really serious illness, you just can't help. You start to see the world differently. I mean, you just don't, as much as anyone can say like, well, none of us knows if we're going to be hit by a car tomorrow. You can say that, but when someone tells you, you have 14 to 22 months, like that's real. That's not, I'll be hit by a car. And your whole way of perceiving things really shifts a lot in so many different ways. I mean, I think as time has gone on, I feel like I've sort of let go of a lot of, I don't know, maybe conflict that I was involved in with others, or things that just don't seem as important anymore. And I do feel like what's more important is the relationships I have with people, is being kind to people. I mean, you suddenly realize what a difference it makes. I mean, everyone is going through something. They either have been, they may, maybe they are right now, maybe they have been in the past, or a family member has, and you realize like there's a lot of suffering out there, and like I don't want to contribute to that. And so I think, my behavior has shifted. I want to be a person in the time that I have who contributes kindness, understanding, who is contributing something good as opposed to adding to whatever is negative out there. And I think, you appreciate, to win this award, I appreciated it so much. Yeah. It was, first of all, just of its own, quite an honor, but it also made me feel very connected to Colorado and writing scene in Colorado in a way that felt very important to me at this moment in life too, that my efforts had been recognized, but also that it kind of solidified a connection that I think I wanted to have, but was never really sure how connected am I to Colorado and to the creative community here. And this kind of made me feel more connected and made me feel very grateful for that.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it seems so obvious that your desire to get to publication and hold this in your hands, this is something you've worked on, this is something of you. And so the impetus to do this thing, to achieve this thing, feels like a very personal goal to get into your hands and have.
Yeah.
But then to have the validation of people reading it and appreciating it, that's something different entirely than just the personal achievement of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true. Not only the story of my novel, but the story of that I'm living at this moment.
Yeah.
And so that, to have the opportunity to have published something and put it out in the world and connect with people who may have that kind of reaction is really meaningful. And I will say the comment I get most often, the scenario is, well, a person will come to me and take me aside, and it's usually an older woman, but sometimes it's been an older man too, and they will say, this is my story. I had this same experience. Without giving away the ending of the book, that may mean different things for different people, but it almost kind of gives me like chills when somebody, because it's often very the same, like, let me take you aside and tell you, this is my story. You just told my story.
That's remarkable. That's really remarkable.
Yeah.
They feel compelled enough because, you wonder for every letter you get or every person who comes and talks to you, how many other people that, sort of ripple effect that you've had.
Yeah.
People that are reading or listening to the story. I mean, I think it's why we tell stories, right? To connect to others.
I think what's so interesting with the audiobook format is, I think without being conscious of it, many of us, open up a book, story starts to get interesting, and we flip through quickly and don't necessarily read the whole story. We kind of want to get to the good part or want to get to what we think is the good part. But the thing with the audiobook is that you really do hear the whole story. It all kind of rolls out for you. I mean, as I listen to your narration, you really get a sense of the description of places. You really get a sense of some of the dramatic scenes, too, who the characters are, what's going on with them, what some of those critical and sort of frightening scenes are about. And you kind of absorb the story in a, I don't know, greater intensity or something, it seems to me. And I wasn't expecting that necessarily. The pacing does sort of encourage you to really get a little deeper into the story and the characters. And I think there's something kind of wonderful about that too, that it's really communicated to you on a deeper level.
Okay, another quick interruption and an explanation. In our chat about the production of the audiobook, the person we're talking about, Walker, is the talented director, producer, and coach, Walker Vreeland, of Walker Vreeland Productions.
I felt very quickly quite comfortable working with Walker. Like he and I sort of shared a vision, or I felt that we did. That's hard when it's your piece of writing. It's hard to let go.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to make, because he has so much experience in the acting and in the audio performance world that his ideas about how the pacing of things or the voice of things or the energy of things, like a lot of his really good notes to me had to do with emotion and energy. I think that's the thing with an audiobook is that it is a performance. It is a performance, but it's such an intimate performance.
Yeah.
It's just you and your listener. And I think he really understands that and did a lot of things to make it feel intimate in the way that he directed it. And I think that's a really great thing to tell other indie authors. I think that's other storytellers that there's a way to go about the audiobook production that is really personal and collaborative. It can feel like this giant thing you're walking into that's this huge, industry, but it can be extremely personal.
It can be both very personal, but also have that kind of professional, the feeling that you have a professional who is directing this project. And that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
I also have had some very nice feedback about your narration. I've had a number of listeners tell me like, oh, I love listening to this story and I really get a sense of all the different characters. And that for me is just wonderful. They're all these different people and they all have to be distinguishable from each other. And I think you have carried that off so amazingly.
Oh, thank you.
You are in the story. You're not thinking like, wait, who's talking? You're right there in the story. And I think that's wonderful.
I think that is the other thing about an audiobook is that it can be very immersive.
Mm-hmm.
That once the listener joins you in that intimate space and buys in, that it can feel like they're in it and there. So yeah, this was a great joy to work on and beautifully, beautifully written. Well, the name of the podcast comes from a poem that is full of essential things. The poem Desiderata starts, go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. And they're just sort of line after line, it talks about things that are essential. The word is actually Latin for essential things or things that are desired as essential. And so I always like to talk to storytellers about essential things, and we did a lot of that. I think your perspective is so unique, having come through and continued to live with something with your own health that has, I think, changed the way you move through the world in ways that are even hard to explain to people. But for you and where you are right now, what do you think is most essential?
I think, when I was first thinking about that, I thought the answer might be, well, it's nature for me. But I actually think in the broader sense that sort of includes where I am in my life and also as a writer too, it's connection. Mm. Because on the level of writing, I want to feel connected to my characters. And when I do, it's like, grace. It's amazing. And I want to connect with the reader and I want them to feel connected to me. And then, on a more spiritual level or maybe more things that I'm thinking about more because of my health, I am more at peace when I am more aware of my connection to nature, you hear the ocean rolling in and you feel connected to the ocean, to the stars, to the universe. And there's something that feels it's so important. And when you don't feel it, you can feel so desperate and lost in a way. And just like you want to hole up and it's sort of a terrible feeling. But when you do have that sense of connection, it just kind of blows you wide open in this pretty amazing way.
Yeah. I love that. Actually, one of the lines in Desiderata is that the universe is unfolding as it should.
Yeah. And I guess that's what you feel when you have a sense of connection, you can understand and you are aware that the universe is unfolding as it should. And that's it.
I'm so grateful for your time and your talent and for being connected to you. I really am. I just feel very fortunate that I am part of this project and that I've gotten the privilege of getting to know you. And I hope that we continue to get to spend time together and connect.
I know. I think we will.
I think we will.
Yeah.
I want to thank Walker Vreeland for the audiobook sample from All the Flowers of the Mountain. And thanks again to Christina. I'll put a link to her website in the show notes, where you can find ways to purchase the audiobook. And please connect. You can reach out through socials or my website anytime. As always, thanks for listening.